At my daughter's engagement party, they placed me behind the curtain with the waiters. I stayed silent and canceled the honeymoon trip I had already paid for. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The Westfield Country Club ballroom sparkled that evening. Crystal chandeliers, white roses arranged in towering centerpieces, and champagne flowing like water. I stood in the shadows, watching the celebration unfold from behind a heavy velvet curtain, positioned conveniently near the kitchen entrance. "More canapes, please." A server brushed past me, not realizing I wasn't staff. I smoothed down my navy dress, the one I'd spent 2 months' salary on, and adjusted my pearls. Real ones. The only luxury I'd ever allowed myself, purchased one pearl at a time over decades of teaching elementary school. At 58, I thought I understood heartbreak. I was wrong. My daughter Willow floated through the room in her designer dress, her hand firmly clasped by Tyler, her fiancé of exactly 3 months. His mother, Victoria, orchestrated the event like a symphony conductor, directing guests, photographers, and waitstaff with elegant efficiency. No one would have guessed. I had paid for everything: the venue, the catering, the flowers, all from my teacher's pension and savings. Victoria merely executed what my money had purchased, while accepting compliments as though it were her generosity on display. "Mom, there you are." Willow appeared. Suddenly, her voice hushed. "I've been looking everywhere." "I've been here the whole time," I said, attempting a smile. "Right where Victoria suggested I wait." Willow glanced nervously over her shoulder. "It's just, Tyler's family has a certain way of doing things. Victoria thought it would be better if I remained invisible." The words escaped before I could stop them. "Don't be dramatic." Willow's perfectly manicured hand fluttered dismissively. "Victoria's family knows everyone who's anyone in Chicago. These connections will be important for Tyler's career, for our future." "What about my connections?" I wanted to ask. "What about the hundreds of families whose children I'd taught over 30 years? What about my worth?" "The Prestons just arrived," Willow continued, not noticing my silence. "Victoria says they're essential for Tyler's promotion. I need to go. Just stay here, okay? We'll talk later." She disappeared back into the crowd, immediately transforming into someone I barely recognized, laughing too loudly, touching her hair too frequently, her eyes constantly seeking approval from Victoria and Tyler. I remained behind the curtain, watching as Victoria introduced my daughter to guests as practically the daughter I never had. Watching as Willow called her Mom twice. Watching as they cut the engagement cake, a cake I had ordered and paid for, without even looking around for me. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne. "Would you like one, ma'am?" I took a glass, grateful for his kindness. "Thank you. I'm Jasmine, Willow's mother." His eyes widened slightly. "I'm sorry, I thought that I worked here." "Don't worry about it." I sipped the champagne, watching Victoria pose for photographs with the happy couple. Apparently, that's the impression everyone's supposed to have. Later, as I was about to leave without saying goodbye to anyone, I overheard Victoria speaking to another guest. "Of course, we're planning the most exquisite honeymoon for them in the Maldives. 3 weeks of pure luxury." I froze, champagne glass halfway to my lips. "That's wonderful of you, Victoria," the woman gushed. Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Well, technically Jasmine is paying for it, teacher's pension or whatever. But I've arranged everything. The poor woman wouldn't know a luxury resort from a motel, but I've ensured they'll have the best bungalow over the water. It's really the least I could do." The room suddenly felt airless. I set down my glass and walked out, invisible as I'd been all evening. In my car, I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. The honeymoon package, $2,500 of my savings, money I'd set aside over 15 years of careful budgeting, was fully refundable up to 30 days before departure. I had never considered myself a vengeful person. I'd taught children about kindness and respect for 30 years. But as I pressed cancel reservation and confirmed, yes, I want a full refund, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't about the money. It was about finally understanding that I had raised a daughter who was ashamed of me, who allowed me to be hidden away while spending my money, who valued Victoria's social connections over my lifetime of sacrifice. The confirmation email arrived. Your cancellation has been processed successfully. I drove home to my small, neat house, the house where I'd raised Willow alone after her father left us, where I'd graded papers late into the night while my daughter slept, where I'd scraped together every extra dollar for her dance lessons, private school tuition, and college fund. For the first time in decades, I wondered what it would be like to spend money on myself, what it would be like to become visible again. Stared at the savings account balance on my phone, $2,400 now safely returned. Money that represented countless extra tutoring sessions after school, summers teaching remedial classes instead of resting, and years of denying myself even the smallest luxuries. The morning after the engagement party, I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, and let myself remember everything I'd sacrificed for Willow. She was 8 years old when David left us. I still remember her standing in the doorway of her bedroom, clutching her stuffed rabbit, asking when Daddy was coming home. I remember the way her small shoulders shook when I finally told her the truth, that he had a new family now with a woman from his office and her 2 children. But we're his real family, she had insisted, her voice breaking. I had pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. We're still a family, sweet pea. You and me against the world, and it had been just us, against mounting bills, against the sudden loss of our comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle, against the pitying glances from other mothers at Willow's private school. I was determined that David's abandonment wouldn't change her life's trajectory. I took on extra work wherever I could find it. Weekends became tutoring sessions for struggling students. Summers were spent teaching instead of traveling. Nights were reserved for grading papers and planning lessons after Willow went to bed. My own mother had offered to help. Jasmine, you're working yourself to death, she'd say during her visits. Let Willow go to public school. There's no shame in scaling back. But I couldn't bear the thought of Willow losing anything more. She was already missing a father. I refused to let her miss opportunities, so I kept her in private school. I maintained her ballet lessons, tennis coaching, and piano classes. I scraped together money for the class trips to Washington, D.C. and New York. I hosted sleepovers and birthday parties that I could barely afford, just so she would never feel different from her wealthy friends. On her 16th birthday, I surprised her with a used BMW, nothing fancy but safe and reliable. I still remember how her friends had crowded around it, impressed despite its modest make, while I stood back, mentally calculating how many extra tutoring sessions it would take to recoup the cost. The real change began when Willow left for Northwestern University. I had saved just enough to cover her tuition and housing, leaving my own retirement fund dangerously depleted. But I was proud, my daughter, attending one of the country's best universities. During her sophomore year, she met Tyler Reynolds during a business ethics class. Son of prominent Chicago surgeon Dr. Reynolds and his socialite wife Victoria, Tyler, represented everything David and I had once been headed toward: wealth, status, connections. The first time Willow brought him home, I saw the way his eyes scanned our modest house, noting the IKEA furniture and the kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 90s. It's cozy, he'd said, in that way people do when they can't think of anything genuinely complimentary. Willow had blushed, embarrassed. Later that evening, she'd suggested that, maybe it's time to renovate, Mom. This place is so dated. laughed it off, but something had shifted. Suddenly, my comfortable little home, the one I'd worked so hard to maintain, wasn't good enough anymore. After graduation, Willow took a marketing position at a firm where Tyler's mother knew someone. She moved into a downtown apartment with rent far beyond her entry-level salary. I suspected the Reynolds were subsidizing their lifestyle, but Willow insisted she was making it work. She began visiting less frequently. When she did come home, it was often with subtle critiques. My clothes were too sensible, my hairstyle too simple, my life too provincial. "Mom, you really should treat yourself to a good stylist," she'd say. Or, "Haven't you ever thought about moving somewhere more vibrant?" What she didn't understand was that I couldn't afford vibrant. I had given everything to ensure her path remained smooth and upward. The first time I met Victoria Reynolds was at a dinner Tyler's parents hosted at their Lake Forest mansion. Victoria had appraised me like a slightly disappointing auction item. "Jasmine, how quaint that you've dedicated your life to teaching. Such a noble profession," she'd said, voice dripping with condescension. "Though I can't imagine the salary allows for much excitement." "Mom loves teaching," Willow had interjected quickly. "And she's really good at it. Some of her students have gone on to great schools." It was meant as a defense, but the way she said it, slightly apologetic, slightly embarrassed, cut deeper than Victoria's thinly veiled insult. Throughout the evening, I watched my daughter transform before my eyes. Her voice took on the same affected cadence as Victoria's. She laughed at inside jokes I couldn't possibly understand. She referenced exclusive restaurants and vacation spots I'd never be able to afford. When Tyler proposed 3 months later with a diamond ring that must have cost more than my annual salary, Willow called, ecstatic. "Mom, you won't believe it. The ring is gorgeous, and Victoria's already talking about a June wedding at the Westfield Country Club. She knows the owner." I'd swallowed hard before responding. "That's wonderful, sweet pea. I'm so happy for you. Victoria says you don't need to worry about anything. She'll handle all the planning since she knows everyone in Chicago. But I'd like to contribute," I'd said, thinking of the savings I'd been setting aside for exactly this moment. "It's traditional for the bride's family to—" "Oh, Mom," she'd interrupted, laughing. "I know, but this isn't exactly a traditional situation. Victoria knows what she's doing, and she has connections everywhere. You can help in other ways." Those other ways turned out to be writing checks for the venue, the caterer, the flowers, the dress. All chosen by Victoria, all paid for by me. And now, as I sat at my kitchen table the morning after being hidden behind a curtain at my own daughter's engagement party, I finally accepted the truth I'd been avoiding for years. I had sacrificed everything to give Willow wings, never realizing she would use them to fly into a world where I wasn't welcome. The phone rang 3 days after the engagement party. I let it go to voicemail twice before finally answering on the third call. "Mom, what did you do?" Willow's voice was sharp, accusatory. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Hello to you too, Willow. Victoria just told me the honeymoon was canceled. What's going on? Please tell me this is some kind of mistake." I moved to my living room window, watching the neighborhood children play across the street. How simple their world still was. "It's not a mistake," I said quietly. "I canceled it." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. When Willow spoke again, her voice wavered between shock and rage. "You did what? Why would you do that? Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "I've reconsidered my contribution." "Reconsidered?" She was nearly shouting now. "Mom, that's not your decision to make. Victoria has already told everyone about the Maldives. Tyler and I have requested time off work. This is beyond embarrassing." I closed my eyes, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Willow, I was placed behind a curtain at your engagement party. A party I paid for entirely. What are you talking about? But there was a hesitation in her voice. She knew exactly what I meant. I stood with the waitstaff all night. Your future mother-in-law took credit for everything I financed. You called her mom twice. Oh my God. Willow's exasperation made my stomach clench. This is what this is about? You're being petty because of some seating arrangement? Victoria was just trying to make everything perfect. You know how important these connections are for Tyler's career. So important that your own mother had to be hidden away? Treated like an embarrassment? You're overreacting. You just don't understand how these social circles work. Victoria was trying to help. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Help who, exactly? I heard her, Willow. I heard her tell people she was arranging your honeymoon when I'm the one who paid for it. $24,000 of my savings. So, this is about the money? Willow's voice dripped with disdain. I thought you wanted to contribute. You always said you were saving for my wedding. Contributing is one thing. Being exploited while being treated as an embarrassment is entirely another. The line went quiet for a moment. Then I heard muffled voices. Willow was obviously speaking to someone else. Tyler, probably. Or Victoria. Mom. Her voice returned, now artificially calm. I'm coming over. We need to discuss this in person. Tyler and Victoria are coming too. My pulse quickened. That's not necessary. This is between you and me. It affects all of us now. We'll be there in an hour. She hung up before I could object. I spent that hour in strange, methodical preparation. I made coffee, arranged store-bought cookies on a plate, and even applied a fresh coat of lipstick, like preparing for a job interview or a firing squad. They arrived precisely on time, a united front at my door. Willow entered first, avoiding my eyes. Tyler followed, his handsome face set in an expression of diplomatic concern. Victoria swept in last, her Chanel perfume immediately dominating my modest living room. Jasmine, Victoria began without preamble, settling herself on my couch as if she'd been invited to take charge. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied, remaining standing. I've decided not to fund the honeymoon. Tyler cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, we're all very grateful for your contributions, but backing out at this stage is rather problematic. Mom, please, Willow added, her voice softer, employing the tone she'd used as a teenager when trying to persuade me. Everyone's already been told about the Maldives. Victoria's friend owns the resort. We'll look ridiculous if we cancel now. I've already canceled, I stated flatly. Victoria's perfect eyebrows arched. Surely this isn't about being placed discreetly at the engagement party? Willow mentioned you were feeling slighted, but really, that was for your benefit. You would have been uncomfortable with the other guests. The sheer audacity of her statement left me momentarily speechless. For my benefit? I finally managed. Being hidden away from my daughter's engagement was for my benefit? Mom, Willow interjected, you know how you get in social situations. You always talk about your students or school issues. Victoria was just trying to make sure you weren't overwhelmed. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had my sweet girl, who once proudly brought her friends to watch me teach, become someone who thought I needed to be hidden away? I see, I said softly. And I suppose it was also for my benefit that Victoria took credit for the party I paid for? That she's telling everyone she's arranging the honeymoon my money was funding? Victoria waved a manicured hand dismissively. Details, Jasmine. The important thing is creating the right impression for the children's future. Surely, you want that for Willow? What I want, I said, my voice gaining strength, is for my daughter to not be ashamed of me. No one is ashamed, Willow started. Really? I interrupted. Then why was I positioned where no one could see me? Why wasn't I introduced to any of your fiancé's family or friends? Why did you let Victoria act as though she was hosting an event I paid for? Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Carter, you're making this into something it's not. My mother was simply trying to help manage the social aspects of the event. I turned to him. Tyler, I've spent my entire career teaching children to treat others with dignity and respect. What happened at that party was neither dignified nor respectful. Victoria stood, her patience clearly exhausted. This is precisely why we tried to manage your involvement. You clearly don't understand our world or what's at stake for these children. Your world, I echoed. A world where people are valued by their bank accounts and social connections rather than their character? That's not a world I want any part of. Mom, stop! Willow's voice cracked. You're embarrassing me. Those 3 words hung in the air between us. That's it, isn't it? I said quietly. I embarrass you. Your teacher mother with her sensible shoes and mortgage on a small house embarrasses you. That's not what I meant. But her eyes betrayed her. I took a deep breath. The honeymoon cancellation stands, and I won't be contributing anything further to the wedding. You can't do this, Willow cried. We've already booked everything based on your promise to help. Actually, I can, and I have. Victoria stood, straightening her designer jacket. Well, if that's your position, I think we should go. Come, Willow. Tyler. We'll figure this out ourselves. For a moment, Willow hesitated, looking at me as if waiting for me to back down as I always had. When I didn't, she shook her head in disbelief. I never thought you could be so selfish, she whispered. As they walked out the door, I wondered if my heart would ever stop breaking. Silence settled over my house after they left. A silence different from the quiet emptiness I'd grown accustomed to over the years. This was a silence that felt like clarity. I wandered through the rooms, seeing my home with new eyes. The worn sofa where I'd read countless bedtime stories to Willow. The dining table scratched from years of science projects and art activities. The walls covered with framed photographs documenting a life dedicated to others. Not a single photo of me alone. Not one image that represented something I'd done purely for myself. You're embarrassing me. Willow's words echoed in my mind as I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The honeymoon refund had been processed, $24,500 now sitting in my checking account. My finger hovered over the transfer to savings button, old habits dying hard. Then I stopped. What would happen if, just this once, I spent money on myself? Not on bills, not on Willow, not on school supplies for my students, but on something entirely for Jasmine Carter? The thought was both frightening and exhilarating. My phone vibrated with text messages throughout the evening. Victoria, Willow is devastated by your selfishness. I hope you reconsider before causing permanent damage to your relationship. Tyler, Mrs. Carter, please think about what you're doing. This wedding means everything to Willow, and finally, Willow herself. Mom, you've never let me down before. Please. Don't start now. The wedding is in 4 months. We need that money. I read each message but replied to none. Instead, I opened my laptop again and typed into the search bar, pottery classes for beginners. Before Willow was born, before I met David, I had loved working with clay. The feeling of earth between my fingers, the meditative quality of the wheel spinning, creating something from nothing. I had abandoned it when life got busy, when responsibilities mounted, when other people's needs came first. The local arts center offered an 8-week course starting the following week. $350 for materials and instruction. My finger trembled slightly as I clicked register and entered my credit card information. After that first small step, something broke loose inside me. I found myself scheduling a consultation with an interior designer, something I'd always considered an extravagance reserved for the Victoria Reynoldses of the world. I made an appointment at a salon that specialized in women over 50, where they promised to find a style that would enhance my silver-streaked brown hair rather than hiding it. The next morning, I called Margaret, a fellow teacher who had retired the previous year. "Jasmine, is everything all right?" She sounded concerned. We hadn't spoken much since her retirement party. "Actually, no," I admitted, "but I think it might be soon. I was wondering if that offer to join you on your trip to Maine is still open?" Margaret had invited me to join her writer's retreat on the coast of Maine, a 10-day workshop followed by a week of exploration. I had declined immediately, citing the cost and my responsibilities to Willow's wedding. "Of course it's still open. The cabin has 2 bedrooms and I'd love the company. But what about Willow's wedding? I thought you were knee-deep in preparations." I explained the situation, surprised by how liberating it felt to voice the truth aloud. Margaret listened without interruption. "Oh, Jasmine," she sighed when I finished. "I've watched you put that girl first your entire life. Maybe it's time. She learned you're a person too, not just her mother." That afternoon, I booked my flight to Maine. The texts and calls from Willow became increasingly frantic as days passed without response. On the 7th day, she appeared at my door, eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, what are you doing? Why aren't you answering anyone?" She pushed past me into the house, then stopped abruptly, noticing the changes. What happened in here? The living room walls were now a soft sage green instead of beige. The old sofa had been replaced by a comfortable, stylish sectional. Artwork hung where family photos once dominated. "I'm redecorating," I said simply. Willow turned to me, bewildered. "Now? With the wedding coming?" "Mom, we need to talk about the honeymoon." I gestured for her to sit. "There's nothing to discuss. I've canceled it, and the money has been reallocated." "Reallocated?" She looked around the room again, understanding. Dawning. "You're spending it on furniture? On paint? That was our honeymoon money." "No," I corrected gently. "That was my money. Money I saved by tutoring extra hours, by never taking vacations, by putting your needs first for decades. And now I'm choosing to spend it differently." Willow's face flushed. "Is this punishment? For the engagement party?" "Mom, I've apologized for that. Victoria was just trying to—" "This isn't about Victoria," I interrupted, "or Tyler, or even the engagement party. This is about me finally recognizing my own worth." "So you're abandoning me? 4 months before my wedding?" Her voice cracked. "Do you know what Victoria is saying about you? How this makes me look?" I felt a pang of guilt. Decades of putting her first had created deep grooves in my heart. But beneath the guilt was something stronger, resolve. "I'm not abandoning you, Willow. I'm still your mother, and I still love you. But I won't be treated as an embarrassment or an ATM. I won't be hidden away or taken for granted anymore." "So what happens now?" She looked young suddenly, uncertain. "Now, you and Tyler and Victoria plan the wedding you can afford without my financial contribution. And I'm going to Maine for a writing retreat with Margaret." "Maine? When?" "Next week. I'll be gone for 17 days. Willow's mouth dropped open. "But we have the menu tasting, and the floral arrangements need to be finalized. Mom, you can't just leave." "Actually, I can. And I am." The words felt powerful, decisive. "And the wedding? You're really not going to help at all." I sat beside her, taking her hand. It was soft, uncalloused, so different from my teacher's hands. "I'll be at your wedding, Willow. I'll wear a beautiful dress and smile in photographs. I'll be proud to watch my daughter get married. But I won't finance a celebration where I'm treated as an afterthought." She pulled her hand away. "I don't even know who you are anymore." As she left, slamming the door behind her, I whispered to the empty room, "I'm just getting to know her myself." The following week passed in a blur of activity. My house transformed. Room by room, I donated clothes I'd kept out of practicality rather than joy. I registered for a retirement planning seminar, determined to rebuild the savings I'd depleted for Willow's benefit over the years. The night before my flight to Maine, I sat on my new patio set in the backyard, sipping wine and watching fireflies dance in the twilight. My phone rang, Victoria's number. I declined the call. A text followed immediately. "We need to talk about Willow's wedding." "This has gone far enough." I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally, I settled on the truth. Me. I have said everything I need to say. Please respect my boundaries. I turned off my phone, packed the last items in my suitcase, and went to bed. For the first time in years, I fell asleep thinking about my own dreams instead of someone else's. The morning of Willow's wedding dawned bright and clear. At least, I assumed it did. I wasn't there to see it. Instead, I was arranging ceramic pieces in the community center's gallery, carefully positioning my collection for my first-ever art exhibition. 3 months of pottery classes had awakened something in me that had lain dormant for decades. My hands, once used primarily for grading papers and wiping away Willow's tears, now created vessels that held beauty rather than others' needs. "These are really exceptional for a beginner, Jasmine," said Robert, my pottery instructor, as he helped me adjust the lighting on a blue-glazed bowl. "You have a natural talent," I smiled, allowing myself to accept the compliment rather than deflecting it as I would have before. "Thank you. It feels good to create something that's just mine." My phone remained silent in my purse. No frantic calls from Willow or cutting texts from Victoria. The silence between us had calcified in the months since my trip to Maine, hardening into something neither of us knew how to break. I had sent Willow a simple card 2 weeks before the wedding. Inside, I'd written, "My dearest Willow, on your wedding day, know that I love you and wish you every happiness, while I won't be attending the ceremony. Please know this decision comes not from lack of love, but from self-respect. When you're ready to build a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be here. All my love, Mom." The card had been returned unopened, the word "refused" stamped across the envelope in red ink. Victoria had called immediately after, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "How dare you abandon your daughter on her wedding day, after everything she's done for you?" I had almost laughed at the absurdity of her statement. "What exactly has Willow done for me, Victoria?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "That's what I thought," I'd said quietly. "I wish you all a beautiful day." Now, as I carefully arranged price tags beside my pottery, modest sums that represented value I had created, I wondered what was happening at the Westfield Country Club. Had they managed to arrange the extravagant wedding without my financial contribution? Had Victoria stepped in to maintain appearances? Was Willow happy, or was she still angry that I had finally drawn a boundary? "Thinking about the wedding?" Margaret asked, appearing beside me with a tray of cheese and crackers for the exhibition. Nodded. "Is that terrible of me? To not be there?" Margaret placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jasmine, you've spent a lifetime being there for everyone but yourself. One day your daughter might understand that this wasn't about punishing her. It was about saving yourself." The small gallery gradually filled with visitors, fellow pottery students, teachers from my school, neighbors who had watched the gradual transformation of both my home and myself over the past months. No one mentioned the wedding except Patricia, my closest colleague at school. "I saw the announcement in the paper this morning," she said, examining a delicate teacup I'd glazed in shades of green. "Smaller venue than originally planned. No mention of the Maldives honeymoon." I nodded, unsurprised. "They had to scale back after I withdrew my funding." "Do you regret it?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it came to this. I regret that my daughter values appearances over authenticity. But I don't regret finally valuing myself." Patricia squeezed my hand. "Well, for what it's worth, I think these are beautiful. You've always been an excellent teacher, Jasmine, But it seems you've been hiding an artist all these years. By mid-afternoon, I had sold 6 pieces, including my favorite bowl, the one with swirls of blue and green that reminded me of the ocean I'd walked along in Maine. The woman who purchased it held it reverently in her hands. "This speaks to me," she said. "There's something so honest about it." I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced before. Different from seeing Willow graduate or get her first job. This pride was wholly mine, untethered from my identity as someone's mother or teacher. As the exhibition wound down, I checked my phone. One text from an unknown number, sent 30 minutes earlier. "It's Tyler. Thought you should know Willow looked for you before walking down the aisle. Victoria claimed you were too busy with your little pottery hobby to attend. If that's not true, you might want to set the record straight." My hands trembled as I read the message. So Victoria had spun my absence as indifference rather than a response to months of disrespect. Typical. I considered calling Willow immediately, then stopped myself. This was her wedding day. Whatever conversation we needed to have could wait until she returned from her honeymoon, a 3-day trip to a nearby lakeside resort, according to Patricia's newspaper update. Instead, I texted Tyler back, "Thank you for letting me know." Willow received my explanation in a card, which was returned unopened. "I wish you both happiness today." As I drove home that evening, 5 empty spaces in my display indicating 5 pieces of art now belonging to others, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The daughter I had raised would be dancing at her wedding reception now, perhaps glancing occasionally at the empty seat where her mother should have been. But the woman I had become, the artist, the individual, the person with boundaries and self-respect. She was driving home with her head held high, her car trunk filled with pottery that had value not because of what it did for others, but simply because she had created it. I was both of these women, the absent mother and the present artist, the heartbroken parent and the empowered individual. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to hold these contradictions without trying to resolve them. At home, I poured a glass of wine and called Margaret. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Whole," I answered. "Broken, but whole." And somehow, that made perfect sense. Almost a year passed before I heard from Willow again. A year of pottery classes that evolved into my own small studio in the converted garage. A year of friendships deepened beyond the superficial connections of work colleagues. A year of traveling, short trips to art galleries, weekend retreats with Margaret, and a solo journey to the Grand Canyon, where I watched the sunrise alone and felt perfectly complete in my solitude. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late May when the doorbell rang. I was elbow-deep in clay, working on a commissioned piece for a local restaurant. I almost didn't answer, but something, intuition perhaps, pulled me to the door. Willow stood on my porch, her hair shorter than I remembered, her face thinner. The confident poise she had adopted since meeting Tyler was gone, replaced by something more vulnerable, more authentic. "Mom," she said simply. "Willow." I didn't move to embrace her, though every maternal instinct urged me to gather her in my arms. "This is a surprise," she nodded, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "I should have called first. You're working." She gestured to my clay-covered hands. "I am," I agreed. "But I can take a break. Would you like to come in?" She stepped. Inside, her eyes widening as she took in the changes to the house. Gone were the faded floral curtains and practical furniture, replaced by simple, elegant pieces and walls adorned with local artwork and my own creations. "Your home looks beautiful," she said quietly. "Different, but beautiful." "Thank you. It feels more like me now." An awkward silence settled between us. There was so much to say that neither of us knew where to begin. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, washing the clay from my hands at the kitchen sink. Please. I busied myself with the kettle while Willow wandered through the living room, examining the photographs now displayed on the walls. No longer just family photos, but images of me with friends hiking in Maine, standing proudly beside my pottery display. "You've been busy," she remarked. "I have. It's been a good year." The kettle whistled, and I prepared 2 cups of chamomile tea, the kind Willow had always preferred when she was upset as a teenager. We sat at the kitchen table, the steam rising between us like the unspoken words. "I'm pregnant," she finally said, her hands curling around the warm mug. I felt a jolt of surprise, followed by a complex wave of emotions: joy at the prospect of a grandchild, sadness that I had missed so much of my daughter's life this past year, concern at the weariness in her eyes. "Congratulations," I said carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Sick, mostly," she admitted with a small smile. "But that's not why I'm here." I waited, allowing her the space to find her words. "I'm here because I want my child to know their grandmother," she continued. "And because I owe you an apology." Now it was my turn to be surprised. In all our years together, Willow had rarely acknowledged when she was wrong. "You were right," she said, her voice catching. "About Victoria, about how I treated you, about all of it." "What happened?" I asked gently. Willow set down her mug, her eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. "After the wedding, things got harder. Victoria's control didn't stop with the ceremony. She had opinions about where we should live, how we should decorate, even which doctors I should see. At first, Tyler sided with her, but eventually even he got tired of it." I nodded, unsurprised. When we found out about the baby, Victoria immediately started making plans. The nursery would be designed by her decorator, the baby shower would be at the country club, the child would attend the right preschool. Willow's voice hardened. When I disagreed, she said something I couldn't ignore. She said she'd make sure the baby was raised properly, unlike me. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Don't be." Willow shook her head. It made me see things clearly for the first time. I realized I've been looking for approval from someone who will never truly give it. And in the process, I pushed away the one person who always loved me unconditionally. Tears filled her eyes. "I was so ashamed of the way you lived, of your job, of this house. I wanted the lifestyle Victoria represented. But you know what? After a year of living in that world, I've never felt more alone or less authentic. It's a seductive world," I acknowledged. "All that luxury and status. It's designed to make outsiders feel inadequate. But that's just it, Mom. You never were inadequate. You raised me alone, put me through college, gave me everything I needed. And I repaid you by hiding you away like some embarrassing secret." She reached across the table, tentatively placing her hand on mine. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. Or ever, maybe. But I want you to know that I understand now. And I'm so sorry." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the designer clothes and carefully styled hair was the little girl who used to sit on my lap during thunderstorms, who made me Mother's Day cards with too much glitter, who once proudly told her class that her mom was a teacher who helped kids be smart. "I'm not going to pretend what happened didn't hurt," I said carefully. "It did. Deeply. But I'm not interested in holding on to resentment, especially with a grandchild on the way." Willow's face brightened. "So you'll be part of the baby's life?" "I'd like to be," I said. "But things need to be different between us, Willow. I won't go back to being taken for granted or treated as an embarrassment." "I understand," she said, quickly. "And Tyler does too. He and Victoria aren't speaking much these days. He finally stood up to her after she criticized me for wanting to work part-time after the baby comes." I raised an eyebrow. "And how did Victoria take that?" "Not well." Willow actually smiled. She's still sending passive-aggressive texts daily, but we're learning to set boundaries. Boundaries are good, I agreed. I've discovered they're essential, actually. Willow's eyes traveled around the kitchen, taking in the pottery tools, the art books, the calendar marked with gallery dates and travel plans. "You've changed," she said softly. "I've become more myself," I corrected. "There's a difference." We talked for another hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. Willow told me about her marketing job, which she enjoyed more than she'd expected. I showed her my pottery studio and explained the commissions I'd begun receiving from local businesses. When she rose to leave, there was a tentative hope between us, fragile but present. "Can I come back next week?" she asked at the door. "Maybe you could show me how to make something. I always loved watching you work with clay when I was little." "I'd like that," I said. And this time, when she moved to hug me, I opened my arms. As I watched her drive away, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. The boundaries I had established hadn't pushed her away permanently. They had created space for a healthier relationship to potentially grow. That evening, I sat in my studio, hands working a fresh ball of clay. This piece wouldn't be for sale, wouldn't be displayed in a gallery. It would be a gift for my future grandchild, a simple, sturdy vessel to hold treasures or secrets or dreams. As I shaped the clay, I thought about the lessons I hoped to share with this new life. That worth isn't determined by social status or bank accounts. That authenticity matters more than appearances. That it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. And most importantly, that love, real love, doesn't require you to make yourself smaller, to hide behind curtains, or to accept disrespect. Real love sees you, values you, and gives you room to grow. I had finally given myself that kind of love. And in doing so, I had offered my daughter the most valuable gift of all, the example of a woman who had found her voice, her boundaries, and her joy. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through the quiet, powerful act of finally putting herself first.